Have you ever flown on a private jet?
Yes. You like the way I leaned in for that one? Have you?
Yes.
Look at us, two people who flew. That's a rare thing.
And so did Robin. Remember when we were talking about this?
Yes. Yes.
So she, what was hers?
Well, that's a good question. I don't remember.
I'm messaging her right now.
What was yours?
I
forget.
I will
Work.
tell my story.
Oh, okay.
Because mine is better than yours.
Really?
Robin, what was your private jet story? We're on the podcast right now, so you can just send your voice message. Robin's never been on the podcast, has she?
Yeah.
Well, mine was, I did an internship for SC Johnson, a family company.
A family company.
And they make Ziploc bags. So I worked at the Ziploc group, which was our whole, it was like a campus just for Ziploc.
Whoa.
It's kind of a funny, you think about these products that have just been around forever.
Yeah,
like they just make money.
I know.
I was like, what do these people do? They all kind of would sit in their office and just like collect their checks. I mean, it's Ziploc.
The product is pretty well made now, you know?
Yeah. So I worked with the guy who would invent new stuff. I actually have 2 patents with them. So when you're in the grocery store and you see the Ziploc storage bags, like to put clothes in and they go under your bed.
Yeah.
That's me.
That's you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a fun fact.
Yeah. And then the other one, it never made it to market. It was like, you know, the vacuum seal bags for like sous vide cooking?
Yep.
So that was a new idea, but chefs were doing it at the time. And I worked for the invention guy for Ziploc.
Okay.
Like he came up with all the ideas. So he would just be like, yeah, do whatever, come up with ideas. And there was kind of this like playland, this whole room with different, I don't know, tools and things like where you could make stuff. And so some days my job was just to try to mess around and come up with an invention.
Yeah.
Which was literally my dream. So we tried to make, he was like, sous vide. I think he may have gone to a fancy restaurant. He's like, sous vide, like you can make this stuff. But then I guess it was dangerous because if you don't do it at the right temperature, some deadly bacteria forms in the meat and then you die. So that's why it never made it to market. But we were making a little handheld vacuum thing that you could use with a regular Ziploc bag. Okay. So you'd like put the steak in a Ziploc.
Yeah. And then whoosh,
with the handheld vacuum, suck the air out, and then put it in a pot of water. Okay. But then we realized like people were gonna die.
Okay, that was a good stopping point.
So we decided it was we had a few meetings and decided it'd probably be good. So anyway, that was the other patent. Why does private jets?
Yeah, I love the way you totally got sidetracked. Sorry. That never happens to you.
No, what people don't know on here is like this is our normal conversations. We get on the podcast and we're very disciplined. Okay, so
are we? I don't know.
So the headquarters was over in Wisconsin, which is like across
place.
Michigan and over Lake Michigan.
Uh-huh.
So
that's a pretty flight.
Yeah, there was a private jet basically to take some of us between those 2 locations. And one time I got to go alone and I get on the jet. It was awesome because like in the airport, you get your own gate with like a red carpet. And then you get on the jet and there was a fruit bowl. I'll never forget, there was a pile of magazines and a fruit bowl, an actual fruit bowl with all these different like bananas and apples. And,
on the jet.
Yeah, on
waiting
the jet.
For you.
The fruit bowl. I don't know why that's what sticks in my mind. And then the other piece I remember is the flight is so short that like before we even got to cruising altitude, we came back down. Yeah. It was just a big like arc. Yeah. Up and down.
Did you feel
the
there. Upness? Like, you
yeah. Yeah. What was yours?
That was the big feel for me. So mine was
Jonas Brothers. You probably had a bunch of them, right?
I know, so how cool. I mean, on the jet with the Jonas Brothers when I was working for them. So. And I remember my very first one. It kind of happened quick because I was working with them, and all of a sudden they're like, "You're coming with us on the jet." And I was like, "What?" Yeah. Like, what? And I am a little afraid of flying, so that kind of I didn't have time to think about it. And
that's why you're so used to it with Greenhouse, right? Like every time,
right?
Oh, okay.
You just throw it at me like, "Hey, cut over this way. We're hopping on the jet.
Hey, hop on the jet with me." And you're just like, you always seem to know what you're doing. Like, how did she?
I know. Frankie was really little. like 9. And I remember he was the coolest one because he was like, "Hey, over here." He's like, "So it's gonna feel really fast." He's like, he's like, "You're gonna just sit down, just buckle up." And he was just like making sure I felt, super comfortable. And what I remember is that there was lots of food very quickly and then very quickly gone. It was but there was like, it was a fast stretch, but it was I don't remember where we flew every time because it was fast and he was right. It was like up in the air. And of course, sometimes I think the story that, they had their own fan mail, but I lived in Dallas. And so sometimes I would manage their home mail.
Yeah.
And sometimes fans would send things to their home mail, which by the way, they didn't like.
Yeah.
So jokingly, sometimes I would hand them their humorous fan mail on the jet plane. And
nice.
So one time I was like, "So this man sent you $1." It was so cute.
Yeah. What does happen on the jet? Like what would
Mostly
you typically
chilling.
do?
Sometimes chilling. Sometimes my very first one I sat across from Kevin and Denise, and me and Frankie sat next to each other. Like where two seats are facing each other. Because Denise is my best friend. So that's who I mostly wanted to sit with. Yeah. But I was working
Nick
too.
And all these low-level people. Who are you, dude? Get out of here.
But mostly they were talking about decompressing over what just happened.
Yeah.
And then what was to come.
This was your pre-coaching career.
Right.
But if only you could do it now and bring me and Priyanka's there.
I know now. I know, right? It was definitely post.
Priyanka, you're in my seat.
I know.
Get out of here. But it would be interesting now with now they all got little kids.
I know. They probably all do things very separately now.
Huh. Well,
so there you go.
Let's hold on. Let me see if Robin sent hers. Oh, here we go.
I don't know that I actually have a real private jet story. I think we were just talking about times we've actually been on them. And I just used to fly with the marching band to all the bowl games in college. And I forgot what we were actually talking about. I think it was the food. The fact that they give you like a 3-course meal and like a fruit bowl. Endless amounts of dessert and just this multi-course crazy thing. And it's like a 1-hour flight.
Yes. See, she read our minds.
I forgot the marching band.
Yeah. I love that we both talked about Ziploc, Jonas Brothers, and hers was marching band.
Boom. Jeez. That's like nobody would know this, but Robin is like very funny. Mm-hmm. She's got a great sense, like sarcastic sense. Very. We need to have her on more often via Voxer.
Yep.
My guest today is Hannah Yonkers, and this is a fun one. We are talking about Gen Z in the workplace, and if you remember a little while ago, we did a 2-part episode on this topic. One of the posts on TikTok got almost 1 million views and just thousands of comments of people from all angles, people who are frustrated with Gen Z, people who are Gen Z and feel misunderstood, and all angles of this topic. Now, what's interesting to me is anytime a new generation comes into the workforce, and reminder, Gen Z just started entering the workforce a few years ago, this always happens. People freak out. Everyone thinks it's the worst thing and the best thing, and when millennials started coming into the workforce, everyone thought the world was ending. So there's a lot of emotion around this topic. And what happened was at Greenhouse, we look at the comments on these things, we see the trends, and we address them on the podcast. And so we noticed the biggest thread was the complaint against us. Why didn't you guys have a Gen Z person in the studio? Why are you talking about it without their voice represented? And I thought that was a good point. So we decided to have someone on the podcast and revisit the topic. Well, fast forward, Hannah Yonkers came over to my house because she is one of our babysitters and was a nanny to my daughter one summer. And my wife and I are getting ready to go out to dinner. Hannah comes over and we're chatting. She goes, "Guess what I saw this week?" I know where this is headed. She said, "Your face popped into my TikTok feed." And it was crazy. It's like a huge post and it was going viral. And I'm just shaking my head in shame, but also a little bit of pride too. So I asked her, I'm like, "Hannah, what did you think? I'm curious your take as a Gen Z." And she said a few things, and she said, thought a lot of what you guys talked about resonated and hit home with my experience and the frustrations I have with my leadership in different jobs. But why didn't you guys have a Gen Z person in the studio? And so I said, well, do you want to solve that? How about you come in? And she was actually very excited to come on the podcast and agreed, and we set it up and we did it. So this episode is myself, millennial, Sunday, a Gen X, and Hannah, a Gen Z, all talking about the issue. And I think if you're someone who leads a Gen Z, you'll appreciate this. If you are a Gen Z, you'll definitely feel understood, and this might help. Or if you know someone in either category, pass this episode along to them. But here we go with Hannah Yonkers.
My name's Hannah. I'm 22 years old. I was born right before 9/11, so that impacted a lot, surprisingly. Now I have to take off my shoes whenever I travel. But yeah, I traveled a lot as a kid, and then landed in Richmond, and I've lived there for the past like 17 years. And now I'm a senior at JMU.
Awesome.
And okay, so for people like me who were not from Virginia, James Madison University, I thought it was just maybe a little no-name college, and then I started meeting more and more people who went there, and it's like a thing. I mean, people love this place. And I just kind of like hung out on the campus one day because we were in that area, and we kept going, man, this place is actually gorgeous. Like the buildings and stuff. It's a really pretty campus.
Hey, did you get to see the Jonas Brothers when they were there?
I did. That was exciting. It was weird seeing them in person. I was like, okay, they're real. They're real. Especially, I was a really big Nick girl, but then when Camp Rock came out as a kid,
what happened?
I was still a Nick girl, but now now I'm a Joe girl.
Do you know Sunday's secret?
No, what?
Oh gosh. Okay. So, well, I've known the boys since they were babies. So, but Denise is my best friend, and I'm Nick's godmother. So. So
that's insane.
It is insane. And of course, it's still insane to me because they're just my boys, and who were just regular people who still are regular people who watching the journey of their lives and their family's life blow up has been so crazy and exciting. So I sang in a singing group with their dad in college. So I'm a singer, And so the boys, when they were just like, Nick was a baby and went on tour with us.
But she was just hanging out with Nick like a month ago. Are you dead yet?
I know. And also I went to Nick and Priyanka's wedding. So that was very cool in India. So I have to say, even I was like a little starstruck.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Anyway, but moving on.
No, I'm a little starstruck. I'm just like, oh, what did I set myself up for?
Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about Gen Z.
I know, but I did see them. I saw like some of the reels and stuff. It looked like they had such a good time. And then like they did some serving of the beers and went to the bar.
I was right outside that bar, like in line, waiting to go in, not even knowing that they were inside. And then there was just like a line of people, and I was like, what?
Nice.
What's going on?
So close. But yeah, Joe's got it going on. They all got it going on. But I know everybody has different like.
And Frankie.
Yeah. And
don't forget Frankie.
I'll never forget Frankie.
We just
speaking of Gen Z.
Yes. Speaking of Gen Z, he speaks to a whole other generation. So I have a 20-year-old daughter, and we used to, when we lived in Texas, Frankie used to come to our house and play all the time when the boys were on tour. So because they were so busy on tour, so we were like that normal family that he could just come be normal with. And so he would have a lot of fun, especially with my Cynthia, our twin, because they're close in age. And so he would play, and we always had like we would call him something else when he would come play with us. So we would go to the water slide park, and we would call him like, I don't know, Paul, whatever. And we'd be like, and some people would stop us. One time I was trick-or-treating with him in California, and he wanted to just be a zombie, and he wanted to just hand out candy like a normal person in Toluca Lakes, California, which is very hard. And so we were out there, and people were coming and getting candy. And sometimes somebody would say, hey, you look a lot like Frankie Jonas. And he'd go, nah, everybody tells me I look just like him. Anyway, happy Halloween.
See ya.
And it was so much fun for me because I wasn't Denise and Kevin. So then they really thought maybe I was the mom, and we got to play fake night all night. And it was so much fun. Oh, cute. It was fun. Anyway, I got a lot of questions for you. First of all, what are you going after in school, or don't you know yet?
So I'm a theater major. I specialize in costume design.
Fantastic.
I really enjoy like keeping my hands on and working through it. A lot of costume design is a lot of research. So you have to be really good at history, which I'm trying. Just a lot of memorization. And then a lot of back and forth, a lot of behind the scenes. But there's nothing better than just like letting go and seeing it on stage and just letting the actors do their thing. And you're just like enjoying the show.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I made that. And I made that.
Well, when did you fall in love with theater?
Ever since I was probably, my first show I did at like 10 or 11. I did a summer camp and we did Annie, and I just so happened to be Annie.
You did? Now I'm having jealousy of you, because here's the story with me. I went and saw the movie because I'm older than you. So I saw the very first Annie at the movie theater. I'm a theater girl too. And I cried when I left the movie theater because all I wanted to do was be Annie. And I never got to, but I thought it was like the dream role. So tell me about it.
I definitely have like a connection to her. Just because like redhead, Ariel, Annie, any of those characters, I'm just like, that's me. No, it was also really fun, and it I don't know, it just like sparked this joy in me, but I didn't really have time for it. I was figure skating at the time for a couple of years. And then I found it again in high school. I was cast in Addams Family, just like an ensemble, like ancestor. And then I just kept with it, took the classes, did all the plays and musicals I could. And then I came to college, and freshman year was when COVID happened. And that was really hard, especially being virtual. I realized I didn't want to act like virtually. It was just really difficult. And so I found a way to participate while not being virtually. And I've always been really into fashion, really into clothes, just like, and jewelry. That's a big thing for me. And then one day I just went up to my professor / mentor / love of my life. I was like, hey, can I costume anything? And she was like, yeah, be at this place on Monday and I'll give you a job. And I was like,
oh, wow.
It's been up ever since.
Fantastic. Would you like to do a little bit of both as your career evolves? Are you hoping to do a little of both, or are you really putting most of your focus on the costume?
I know how hard it is to be an actor. I auditioned for my friend's play last year and ended up getting it. And it was a 2-person show. It was an hour and a half. And I feel like that was a nice finality.
Okay.
Like a nice send off.
Yeah.
I really enjoy, making things and having the satisfaction of it being complete. And as an actor, I feel like you're always working on not necessarily the same thing, but there's no really like completion with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. It's just both of us had worked kind of in some jobs that were like big corporate world, where that was always my same complaint. You never really build something or say like, oh, it's done and here it is. Some people would always be like, I just want to go build a product or something that I can say is done. Or I just look forward to like mowing the lawn or something where it's like, I did it, it's done. And being able to show for what you did. Yeah, it's tricky when it's never ending.
So you picked something where there's going to be something tangible, which is so cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
For anyone who didn't like know the context here, is we were talking about Gen Z on the podcast, I don't know, a few months ago. And especially on TikTok, there was just a lot of conversation around some of the different nuances, and especially calling us out like, well, how about we get somebody who is a Gen Z? Because I'm a millennial, Sunday, you're a Gen X. And it's like, so that's why me and Hannah were talking. We're like, well, hey, do you want to come on and chat? Because she also had some similar thoughts and perspectives. So that's what we're doing here, is kind of just following up on those conversations and to hear from the different sides of it.
That was a miss on our end. You know what I mean? That was a miss. But it's so interesting because I've heard another podcast where I did hear a father and a son who's a Gen X, and they were talking about the difference in the workplace. And it really interested me as well to hear both both perspectives as well. So yeah, and I really love this person. And I think I threw out there that I have Gen X kids.
Gen Z.
I'm so sorry. I'm the Gen Xer.
Gen X kids would be very odd.
That would be weird. Yeah. I have Gen Z kids. So I do a lot of my sharing from their perspective because they share so openly with me. But the idea of their mindset around work is very different than ours. Do you agree?
I'd say so.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest difference? If I give you just no leading at all, and just like maybe even millennials, Gen X, what do you feel is like difference in the mindset around just work when I just say the word work?
I'd say it's definitely like how we were raised. Like I was raised by Gen X parents. I said earlier, I was born right before 9/11. And then when I was 7, there was the big housing crisis. And my family has been like pretty middle class, but ever since, 2008, there's been like declines. And not to get like too deep, but I always took on a lot of financial anxiety just hearing my parents talk about it. And so I always thought, I have to get a job. I have to be successful. I have to be stable. And so it's put a lot of pressure on how I view life and how I view not only the workplace, but like my coworkers, my managers. I always try and make sure that there's like fairness, equity, especially with pay.
Mm-hmm.
That was the big thing with my last job at a country club. It paid like directly minimum wage. And when I tried to say like, hey, I'm one of your best servers, can we get this up? Like it's been over 3 months and there hasn't been like a review on my end. And they raised it about $1. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Didn't feel so good.
No, especially because, they tell me how well I'm doing, but it's not showing like on their end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was a big difference. So yeah, so some of that was your upbringing, and then some of it is just like where you're at right now, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people especially in that one episode, were talking about living wage, and obviously it's a big topic right now. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I've definitely, settled with the fact that not a lot is going to happen unless we do something about it. I've taken like some comments from the posts that I came across on my For You page, and I just want to touch on it. There were 2 comments in particular. I'm paraphrasing. It says, I literally don't care about anything. He just said, pay me well. And then us Gen Z just want to check. And for me, that just seems like I went on their profiles and they didn't have a profile picture. They were private. It just seems to me that they were like 14-year-olds that have never even been in the workplace, that don't realize how much the workplace actually matters. Someone else said, work is half my life, so I'd like half my life to mean something. Mm-hmm. And I think that sums up at least the people and my peers at college think about. If they're putting all their time and effort into something, they want it to mean something, but they also want to be compensated for the amount of work that they're putting into. And in most cases, that isn't what's happening.
Yeah.
Especially with healthcare being tied to our jobs, which doesn't really happen in a lot of other countries. Your whole life is tied to your job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it always meant to me. It's early on in working. I mean, maybe even before that, it's like we spend most of our waking hours at work. So yes, I want it to mean something. And that was, for my generation, maybe a newer question, coming from a generation that was just trying to like survive, get the paycheck. And now it seems like there's even a further iteration for your generation where it's not just like, oh, some people are asking that question. It's kind of it's table stakes. It's like a no-brainer. Why are we even talking about this? Of course it needs to matter.
And I think a big difference between the generations is our access to the internet. I was given an iPod and unfiltered access at 11 years old. which means I've been exposed to the world for over a decade now. And just the amount of communication we have access to. Like I have friends in London that I've never even met, but we've been mutuals online for 10 years now. Like that's insane.
Yeah.
Like back then it used to be pen pals. No offense, but
yeah.
Now I can just text her and just be like, "Hey, what's up?" She's like, "Oh, nothing, just going to uni."
Yeah. yeah, exactly. And that's Sunny and I were talking about that earlier on a different episode about just that exposure is a big part of what changes things. Because Hannah, when you and I were talking, you said, yeah, it's like, you know, when you get into a job and somebody from an older generation's like, oh, well, you got to grind and like get, you know, put in the time that I put in. And that doesn't seem like it makes sense for people in your stage. It's like part of it is that disconnect of exposure. Like, well, if you've actually been already exposed to so many thoughts and ideas beforehand, then your expectation set is different than someone who had to grind it out. Well, they never ever were exposed to things until they were in that stage of that job. But you're
Exactly.
in response to that kind of comment, like, oh, well, you gotta put in the work that I did. You gotta kind of experience what I did. And you said, well, times have changed. Like it's different now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably the hardest one sometimes for Gen Xers to understand. I mean, we hear you, we do. But even my own children, we've had this talk, is that you're right. I think we grew up in a world where we accepted low pay and the grind for a lot longer than you guys will accept it. Does that make sense? We were like, keep working hard, keep working hard, keep working hard. At some point, you're going to meet the right person. You're going to keep networking. You're going to find the right connection. You're going to keep learning, and you're going to eventually move up the ladder, which did happen in my case, right? Like it did, but it was slow. It honestly was slow.
Yeah.
It was not fast. And I think that sometimes where we get confused is that we think that you guys think it's going to move so much faster. But I also think that you've lived in a faster world. So you think, yeah, it can happen faster. So I think that's where we need to understand that more.
Yeah. And to go off that, we're not discrediting any work that, you know, older generations have put forward. It's more so like we can't accept that lower rate because it's just not like fiscally possible.
Yeah.
With rent rising, with just the entirety, like cost of living is just so much more expensive these days that it's just not possible for us to accept that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw the best post yesterday. We need to clip it in here. It was like this woman at the grocery store and the store worker is like scanning each item and like having more and more of a panic attack after every scan, but he's kind of acting like she's, I don't know. It's like the delivery room. He's like, ma'am, I need you to like look me right in the eyes. Breathe. Just breathe. I'm going to scan the limes. And then he scans the limes. And she's like, no. And it made me think of that because I do think that's true. And that's where some of the, like, right. we want you to have to experience what we did. Okay, that's fair. Because, yeah, you can't enter a job and immediately get promoted to be the VP. Like, life doesn't work that way.
Right.
But it doesn't mean it needs to be the same as it was back then. Because to your point, like cost of living is insane now, even just to get groceries, let alone other factors. Like now you can start your own business in one day. And so you might be in your first year of, being in the workforce and you can actually be a CEO, like running your own thing. Whereas, back then, like you couldn't. It actually took a very long time to be able to start your own thing. So that wasn't accessible.
Yeah. Well, also you got to keep in mind, like you can just call yourself a CEO and run a business virtually versus back then it was like brick and mortar. Like you had to be there. You had to physically build it.
Mm-hmm. I love the way your generation can have multiple income streams if you want to. I love that. I feel like I never even thought, I couldn't even think that way. when I was younger, because there was just no means to think that way. Now it's like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful about your generation being able to do that as well.
Yeah. I think because of that exact factor, like 10 years from now, we won't even recognize what work looks like. It will be so vastly different, because I think people think it's a step change, like, oh, things have changed a little, and then COVID changed it a little, and now we have hybrid and remote, and that's such small thinking. Like, actually, the entire fabric of it has changed. The possibilities now are more than exponentially different, and it's like we're just starting to see the beginning of that, I think.
When I'd love to ask you this, because I feel this split wording here. A lot of people in your generation are saying meaning and pay. Meaning and pay are the two words I hear a lot. So I get the pay part. First of all, it needs to be higher. It's ridiculous, because you're right. The world's more expensive. I feel like when my parents, I'm going to say, kicked me to the curb basically after college, only because we weren't really having those conversations back then. It was almost like not normal to, the world was cheap. I think I got an apartment for $200. It was like super, super cheap, right? I know it was so cheap. But for you guys, when you say meaning, though, of course, what are you guys talking about in the world of meaning?
Yeah, I think going back to internet and exposure, we're exposed to a lot of injustice and inequalities in the world. And so it just seems pretty like fruitless to go to a job and work as a cog in the capitalist machine with no purpose and no meaning. Especially when most of these companies, are paying minimum wage while their CEOs are buying their fourth yacht, while actively, destroying the planet.
Yeah. Well explained. What do you feel most proud of about your generation?
I think that we just don't take a lot of that word.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I know. I can feel it.
I'm allowed to cuss on this.
Yeah.
And we don't take no for an answer. A lot of my friends have gotten jobs because they've been persistent. No doesn't really mean anything these days. They're just like, we have to do this. So, just keep working hard. A lot of people say oh, Gen Z doesn't work hard. They just want all these benefits and they're not going to put forth the work. That is the complete opposite. We are grinding. We are out there. We are on our hands and knees, practically begging. We want to survive and we want to thrive. And at this case in point, we don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I love the determination and motivation that my generation has.
Yeah.
I love that too.
Where do you think that comes from? That we were talking about a specific part of it, which is how how Gen Z in general is so willing to just speak their mind and say what they want and need, and how even in my generation that seems like I'm so jealous of that. Almost, it took so long to learn how to say what I need to say. Do you think that's also just an exposure effect?
I think that, but I also think of how we were raised. I'm not going to say I was a wild child, but I will say that I questioned a lot. And my mom would constantly say oh, I never spoke to your grandmother like that. And I was like, why? Didn't you want to know why? Didn't you want to know why things worked and how things happened and why we couldn't get like that? But you also have to remember that women couldn't own credit cards until 76, 50 years ago. And so back then they didn't question it.
Right. That's so huge. It's so interesting. I've had this very same discussion with my daughter, because you're right. Asking why is wonderful. What we were told, it was disrespectful. I love that stigma is continuing to be moved on. It was just be quiet. It was just be quiet. It was And so we were hushed and pushed away a lot. In fact, I joke sometimes with Steve that like being a child of the 80s, it's a humorous joke. It's funny. I mean, I loved my childhood, honestly. I loved it. But sometimes I think back and I'm like, I don't know how I survived because I don't know where the parents were. I sometimes don't. I'm like, they really just kind of, it was that generation of, it was like, go away, kids. You know, it was like, go away and just don't say anything. And so that's kind of sad. And I do think that it's swung the other way. And so it scares people sometimes because they're like, wow, look at all this voice. Look at all this voice here. And on that note, now listen, this is not me saying this. I want your reaction to Simon Sinek's point here. Okay. And this was something I said on the podcast that we got a lot of about. So I want to say it and get your point. Okay.
All right.
So, and he's beautiful. He speaks really beautiful to, I think, this generation. But he's also trying to help the managers who are managing this generation. But I don't know if you know who he is, but you might want to look him up afterwards. Okay. Simon Sinek, Sinek. But he was saying one of the most amazing things about your generation was because of COVID and all that happened with Black Lives Matter, he feels like you guys have become the activists, that you guys live in a very activist mentality. Like you even said, you're like, no, we're going to push through. We're going to like be persistent. Right. So he's like, I think that they have a very activist mentality. He goes, where I see the deficit is that because of COVID and because they were raised in technology, communication is not their greatest strength because they've been able to do it in short sound bites their whole life. Da-da-da, boom, 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 in short sound bites. So this is where he feels, this is his words, remember? That sometimes because of that deficit, they're either strong activists where they have a very loud voice where they'll go right to the top to the CEO's office and say, this is exactly how I feel, or they might ghost and disappear because that middle place of having a good, hearty conversation about things being difficult or tough is not easy for them because they haven't had to have them. They've texted them. They've texted their difficult conversations. So with managers feel as though a lot of the Gen Zs either go right to the top or disappear. And that is what he is experiencing and seeing. And he's saying, how can we help our managers, help them not run or go to the top? And I'm like, maybe we need to text them. I was like, honestly, I was like, maybe some of our one-on-ones need to be through texting, like meet them where they're at. But I was wondering your thoughts there. I know you haven't entered the workplace officially yet, but that is what some of the Gen Z's feedback is coming back on about. Any thoughts?
Mm-hmm. I have a strange analogy.
Go for it.
Have you ever seen or heard the thing where it's like, would you rather be a cult leader or a cult follower? And then I don't remember who this quote is actually, but it's like, you make more money as a leader, but you have more fun as a follower.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think like not everybody is built to be a CEO.
True.
That's just not like in their bones.
True.
Most people are fine with having not disappearing because no one disappears. Everyone has their purpose in life. But some people just are fine with the simple, the normal,
Yes.
the basic life. And of course we have, not to say that they're obviously very hardworking because, they have to be in this economy. But then we have the CEOs and it's like, not everybody gets to that point in the most ethical or legal way.
True.
So it's like, what differs from the hardworking men to the hardworking man with a title?
Nothing, honestly. They're a person just like us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
With just a couple more zeros in their bank account.
So that's what comes to your mind when I even say that. You're like, well, there's no difference in the person. Yeah.
Just the title.
Yeah. How do you feel like communication is in your generation? Where do you think the communication line is?
I personally haven't had a difficult time with communication. I did have a manager who would constantly call me, and I don't know if it's just me, but hey, if you could send a 3-word text,
Much better.
We don't need to have a conversation. Like I'm driving to work. I don't want to pick up my phone call. I'd rather CarPlay tell me, hey, I'm going to be late. And I'm like, okay, cool. I can slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
No, I'm a Gen X and I like that better. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I think communication really just differs from people to people, and it really is like your responsibility to pick up on how different people communicate, whether that's phone call, text, in person, email. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
you just got to adapt.
Adapt to their adapting to the kind of communication. Yeah, for sure. What do you, when you're leaving, I want to know, like, what do you think you're going to be looking for in a workplace? That it was interesting. So my husband's a professor, and I was telling him that I was having this conversation today, and I was like, "Is there anything you want to know?" And he was like, because he has a lot of students, and he was like, ask her, what are you looking for in employment in the next, like, when you think of the first thing, like, what's most important to you?
I don't know. I think a fun workplace can mean more than a lot of people like think it could be.
Yeah.
Like, yes, pay is at the top, but if you don't enjoy going to work, then what's the point? If you're just like a zombie, like going through your 9 to 5, then what's the point? You know, I want to have a purpose to my daily life rather than just like going through the schedule.
Hey, I'm like that too, aren't I, Steve?
Yes.
There was another comment that I wrote down from your TikTok where someone said, I stayed at my job for 2 years that paid $7.25 an hour because my manager actually cared about me.
Oh,
I saw that comment. Yeah,
for sure.
And that was so interesting that sparked this conversation with you, because that's what we focused on in that episode, because that's what we hear from people.
It is.
Of all generations, but definitely increasing as you get younger. And yeah, I mean, you kind of called it out. Like, a lot of them were a little bit spoof accounts, but the majority of comments was around like, I don't care about purpose, just pay me, which is kind of funny and interesting. I don't know. We had a lot of laughs because we were like, well, yeah, of course we all like to get paid better. We weren't saying that they don't like pay.
Yeah.
But I think we're hitting on it, both sides of it in this conversation. Like, there is a problem with pay right now.
A huge problem. I don't know if you've seen it, but it would be a great thing for you to watch. But Obama just put out a documentary about people at work, and it's on Netflix.
It was really good. Yeah.
So lower middle, it's wonderful. But one thing that really stood out to me was he was walking through the grocery aisles with someone, and he was like, what's like a really big challenge? And she was like, well, right there. She goes, look at that cereal box. She goes, it's $6.95. She goes, basically, that's 1 hour of work for me. I mean, I was like, there, like, when you break it down right there, that is the reality of what she is experiencing. And that's not right. Yeah. And so, but I love the way you said that you would love, the pay is most important, but having some fun and enjoying yourself is right up there too. As well. I love that. For sure.
A lot of people in the comments, they said the same thing.
Yeah.
Like another person said, if I'm being paid well and treated well, I'll do any job. Boomers act like we're asking for a lot.
Yeah. And you're not.
It's like, yeah. We're asking to be treated like adults that we are, and to be paid well. And that's it.
Yeah. The one daughter I was talking about, she had a few restaurant jobs, and she would come home and talk to me about it. And she goes, Mom, if I could just have a manager like you, I would actually stay at a restaurant job. She was like, I like restaurant work, but there's just not a lot of good managers. She goes, where they just treat you with respect. Literally, if I make a mistake, she's like, she's like, have a respectful conversation with me about my mistake instead of just blasting me. She's like, and I'm a person. And she just felt like she had so many managers that blasted her and then made her feel belittled and not smart. She's like, I've never been in the restaurant service before either, you know? And so we would talk about just talking to people like they're a person, even just that at these beginning service level jobs. She's like, would mean a lot to me.
Yeah. Hannah, what is, like, among you and your friends, how do people think about having a side hustle or having their own business? Is that a common?
I feel like it's strange to find someone who doesn't have a side hustle.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like, if you don't have a steady source of income, especially as a student, you need to have a couple things like on your roster to be able to like keep up with it, like you're at least like spending money, grocery money, gas money. If they're paying their rent, they need to figure it out. They need to hustle. They need to survive.
Yeah.
Do you think of your career? Maybe you don't, I don't know how you think about your career at this point. Do you kind of think of it through that lens? Like, I'll probably have multiple threads going on.
Yeah, I definitely think of different options. But when it comes to my career, a lot of people are just like, so what are you going to do? And I'm like, it's not that easy, especially with a lot of people who don't know the extent of and all the jobs that are actually out there, especially with theater. They think of theater, they think, oh, the struggling actor. And yes, that's a big thing. But it's not just that. There's a lot of work behind the scenes. There's a lot of like museum work. There's a lot of new shows, especially with concerts, drag performances. You think of like, I don't know, I've seen these like mega churches on TikTok where they have these spectacular like $1 million performances, and I'm like, they probably pay well.
Yeah.
It's probably
they
more
probably pay well.
there.
They need those costumes.
They do. They need those costumes. I love it.
Is there anything you had in mind or on your list, Hannah, that you wanted to talk about?
I don't know. A lot of people that have access to the internet shouldn't. And that's a big thing. Like I didn't really, get into all of this until probably like high school. But little kids are getting access in a phone at like 8 or less. Like we think of like sticky iPad kids, and we think like a 5-year-old holding the screen in front of them, like at restaurants. They don't know how to communicate, but they know Cocomelon. But they also have access to a keyboard, and they have access to the internet and are able to like spread information when they don't know anything yet. Yeah. Especially in high school, I thought I was the smartest person. Not saying like I was cocky or anything, but I was like, I thought I knew a lot. Yeah. And looking back, that was 4 or 5 years ago. I'm like, girl, come on. Even now I have the knowledge. My frontal lobe still has 3 more years, but I'm like, I think I'm pretty good. And then I meet someone who's 26, and I'm like, wow, the difference between us is just so much. And I think we're constantly growing, and we need to have these conversations, especially with different generations, to be able to get their point of view, just to be able to keep on growing and keep up with the world as it's growing at a faster rate than we are.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if this is a too broad of a question. Feel free to say so. But we do have a lot of leaders who listen, and they are trying to be, they're very intentional, like growth-minded people. So they want to be better leaders. They want to help people is typically who pays attention to our stuff. So I would love to hear, I mean, to that point of like, let's hear from a Gen Z. Like what do you want leaders to know and pay attention to and work on as they lead people in your generation?
Yeah, I think there isn't really a hierarchy when it comes to friends. And I feel like, yes, there are leaders, and yes, there are managers, and then there are the workers. But in reality, we're all people. And it really does come down to communication. Like I want to be treated with the respect that you want from me, that you expect from me. Yes. I'm like, well, if you're an awful person and I still have to treat you like this, why do I have to treat you like that when you're giving me the less than the bare minimum? Yeah. So I think it all just comes down to respect and communication.
Yeah. I was just going to say, what are you most excited about for your generation?
I'm excited to see what the world becomes. Like, I don't know how old the oldest Gen Z is. I think maybe like 26, 27 at this point. But they're starting to have kids. I know people my age starting to have kids, and that scares me. Like friends from high school just got married, and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, slow down a little bit. No, but I just want to see how the world reacts when we come to fruition, you know, come into our place, find ourselves, and then find our place in the world. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'd say personally, I still have a lot of growing to do. There's a lot more of the world I want to see before getting 9 to 5, settling down, like having kids, if any, you know.
You know what though? So do I. Like, I think that people who have growth mindset always feel that way. Like I still have more to learn. And I think that's what's so awesome. I think the closed-minded ones are the difficult ones to work with sometimes, you know? And yeah. But you know what also is this, I was telling Steve when all this new talk came out around Gen Z, I was like, you know, in the 80s, our parents were scared of us. You know, and then it was like, and then the millennials came out and everybody was scared of them. And then it was like, everyone's always scared of the new thing. I was like, really, it's just about listening and adapting towards what's changing in the world and what's changing about that generation. And usually there's something really good that is coming from a new growth and a new mindset and generation. And it's just scary because you don't know it. So just listen and learn. And that's what I have found works best.
Yeah. I feel, at least like speaking for myself, I'm not scared of like other generations. I feel like they should be scared of us just a little bit. Just seeing what we've accomplished in, you know, ever since Black Lives Matter, all 2020, COVID, that really flipped a switch in a lot of me and my friends' brains. A little goes a long way. There's this one theory, it's called like the 3% theory, where if only 3% of the population band together, that is like the least amount you need to make a difference.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, that's so cool. I like, thanks for coming on and taking the time and the chance to do it. Because I think it is helpful to have these conversations. My takeaway is the same thing. Like, I'm the same as you, Sunday. I always want to grow and learn more. And I think that it is easy when any kind of change comes along, but especially generations colliding, that's just like it just becomes a big topic because it's like a global change all at the same time. But we get scared of change and we just see the differences as problems. And it's like, no, there's actually so much good stuff. And to your point, Sunday, this cycle always repeats. So it's not like anyone who's griping, it's not like they were never the problem themselves. Of course there's challenges. There's challenges with any people working with other people. So yeah, it's kind of a refreshing, like, well, how can we learn together and take advantage of, for example, the benefits that Gen Z brings to the table?
Yeah, because they are going to change the world. We just really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing where life brings you. So thank you for your time.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.
Yeah.